Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. If you're looking to grasp exactly how risk management is structured under the new ISO/ISE 42001-2023 standard, well, you are in the perfect place. Today, we're going to visually map out exactly who is responsible for what, because let's be honest, when it comes to managing the immense risks of artificial intelligence and information security, it literally takes a highly structured village. Okay, let's dive right into this. Who really manages AI risks? I mean, what's the first thing that pops into your head? If you're like most people, you might just assume that risk management kind of happens in a vacuum, or maybe that it's simply the IT department's job to keep everything locked down and secure. But the ISO standard explicitly challenges that whole assumption. Managing these complex systems isn't just some isolated technical problem, it is an organizational, ecosystem-wide responsibility. To really wrap our heads around how this works, we have to start with a fundamental definition straight from the standard. A stakeholder is defined as individuals, groups, or organizations that have a direct or indirect interest in the organization's risk management process and the outcomes of risk treatments. I want you to really let that sink in for a second. Under the standard, a stakeholder is literally anyone who can affect or be affected by your organization's risk actions. It's an incredibly broad, yet absolutely necessary definition. So, to make sense of this massive web of people, we're going to use a concentric circles approach. We'll start with the broad risk management ecosystem, define our internal and external stakeholders, look at why documentation matters, and finally, talk about acing the ISO audit. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the risk management ecosystem, looking both inside and outside the walls.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the stark contrast between the internal operators and the external forces. Think about it. Inside the walls, we have our internal stakeholders. These are the folks directly involved in managing risk on a daily basis. And that runs the gamut from your top executives all the way down to your floor employees. But then outside the walls, we have our external stakeholders. These are the regulators, your customers, and the investors. Now, they might not be the ones actively writing your security code, but they are absolutely applying the pressure, setting the expectations, and relying entirely on the outcomes of your risk treatments.
Moving right along, let's zoom in on Section 2, defining internal stakeholders, basically the inner circle.
Look at this breakdown. It's such a brilliant contrast between the big picture strategists and the tacticians actually on the ground. At the very top, you have top management, and they don't just sign the checks, right? Under ISO 42001, they hold the ultimate responsibility. They're the strategists setting the risk appetite and integrating risk management into the overall business strategy. Just below them, the risk manager oversees the actual implementation of those activities and compiles all the necessary reports. Then we have the employees. They're your tacticians. They're the ones actually following the safety protocols, implementing the controls, and flagging vulnerabilities. And finally, we've got the internal auditors, who provide independent assurance to management by evaluating if the whole system is actually working. Every single level has a distinct, mandatory role to play.
Okay, let's step outside the organization for a second for Section 3, mapping external stakeholders from the outer perimeter. So, let's break down this outer ecosystem. It's kind of like a four-part puzzle. First up, we have regulators. Whether we're talking about data protection authorities or industry-specific watchdogs, they're the ones setting the rules and enforcing the laws you have to follow. Next, we have customers. They fully expect that the products or software they use are totally free from vulnerabilities and that their privacy is protected. Then you've got investors and shareholders. They are demanding financial stability. They need to know that a sudden cyber breach isn't going to completely destroy their ROI. And finally, suppliers and contractors, who need to ensure disruption-free delivery of their components just to keep your whole value chain moving. These external groups, they don't just passively watch from the sidelines. Their expectations directly dictate how the internal team must operate. Which naturally brings us to Section 4, why documentation matters. Really, this is the glue that holds the whole shebang together. Here's the hard truth, though. This entire stakeholder map, it's completely useless if it only exists in theory. Read this quote directly from the source material with me. Proper documentation ensures clarity, accountability, and transparency, contributing to a successful audit that supports the continual improvement of management systems. You see, documentation is that crucial layer that wraps around our entire map. If you don't write down exactly who's doing what, how they're engaged, and what their specific roles are, well, an auditor has literally no way of verifying that your system is functioning up to the ISO standard. Let's move on and see how this builds into a really actionable, step-by-step process. Step 1 is to comprehensively identify all of those internal and external stakeholders we just talked about. Step 2 is to define and align their specific responsibilities, making absolutely sure everyone knows exactly what's expected of them, both in a crisis and in daily operations. And step 3 is to formally document these roles for future reference. You've got to record everything, from meeting minutes to survey results to policy assignments. It all needs to be ready to go when the auditor comes knocking.
I actually like to think of this as the holy trinity of documentation. Number 1 is transparency, making sure everyone fully understands how their specific role fits into the broader audit process. Number 2 is accountability, basically eliminating any ambiguity so you can definitively prove who does what. You can't just wave your hands and say, oh, the IT guy handles it. You must have a documented chain of responsibility. And number 3 is alignment, ensuring that every single stakeholder's role directly supports the overall high-level strategic goals of the organization.
All right, bringing us home to Section 5, acing the ISO audit, the ultimate test.
Because, look, when that lead auditor finally arrives, they are absolutely not just taking your word for it. They are specifically hunting for clearly defined and recorded roles. Your documented stakeholder map is your rock-solid primary evidence that accountability chains genuinely exist within your walls. It proves that the everyday actions of your floor employees are perfectly aligned with the risk appetite set way up top by management. And honestly, most importantly, under ISO/ISC 42001, it provides a factual, data-driven baseline for continuous improvement. Your documented ecosystem proves that your organization's risk management isn't just corporate jargon. It's a highly structured, constantly evolving reality. So, what does this all mean for you? Well, here's the big question. Is your stakeholder map actually ready for the auditor? Have you clearly drawn those lines between your internal tacticians and your external forces? And is every single responsibility recorded and totally transparent? I highly encourage you to take a really close look at your own organization's preparedness after this. If you've enjoyed mapping this all out with me today, I'd invite you to keep exploring the fascinating depths of the ISO 42001 standard. Thanks so much for focusing in with me today, and keep learning.